In this episode of the Construction Lending Podcast, we sit down with Josh Ernst from Backflip, a proptech and fintech company. Together, we discuss how their innovative technology-focused approach is empowering real estate entrepreneurs to revitalize communities and make informed property investments. Join us as we examine the synergy between community, capital, and technology that is reshaping local economies and driving the modernization of America's housing market.
Do we like to better utilize our time? And if the answer is yes, and I believe it is, and most of our members and our customers, I think, feel the same way, then what are the ways with which we can help you save time? Generally, we need to figure out more efficient and more effective ways to allow for things to be built and rebuilt. We all need to help each other, and this speaks to community. The 2% of homes that are owned by Wall Street actually doesn't change the pricing dynamic nearly as much as the fact that we truly underbuilt by millions of homes over a decade plus.
I'd like to welcome everybody today to the Construction Lending Podcast. I'm Sean Ferris, your host, CEO of Land Gorilla. And on the podcast today, we got Josh Ernst from Backflip. Josh, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, this is a fun and exciting one for me. So, for our listeners here, why don't we go ahead and get started? And I would love to learn a little bit more about Backflip and where Backflip came from.
Sure. I think it's helpful to start with what we're doing and our mission, and then break down kind of how we got here. Backflip is all about empowering entrepreneurs. And specifically, we're supporting entrepreneurs to revitalize homes so that future and current generations can love where they live. Now, what does that mean? Practically speaking, we support entrepreneurs who are investing in residential properties, 1 to 4 unit, single family detached, apartments, condos, duplex, triplex, up to 4 unit, looking to do value add improvements. So they can be fixing and flipping properties and selling. They can be fixing and renovating and then holding to term. They can be renting those long-term or Airbnb-ing them. But it's all about improving homes and improving the community. And the entrepreneurs that we support run small businesses. So these are small business SMB customers. We call them members. Our customers, our app users are members on Backflip. And by and large, they either do this full-time or they want to do it full-time. They're pursuing a different path, so to speak. If they have a full-time job, maybe they work in finance or they work in construction, but they really want to be independent, financially independent. And so they're pursuing this entrepreneurial journey for themselves. And it's a tough job. If you think about everything that they have to do, they have to understand real estate. They have to understand their market dynamic that they want to operate in. They have to understand sales or marketing, project management, construction. They have to understand interpersonal relationships,
A lot.
team. They have to think about finance and structuring capitalization for these deals. They have to think about data and analytics. And if you break down all of those components, several of them may be what we would call alpha generators, things that they maybe could control, where they could help themselves or help the project move to a substantially better place. And several of those things are actually fairly mundane. They're actually just time-consuming tasks that, quite frankly, could be better run through software or through data or through someone else, a partner supporting them in those parts of their journey, so that they can be freed up to take that time to go do whatever they do best. What's their alpha? To go operate the rehab a little bit better than their peer group, or to go do a different design that someone else would never be able to innovate on or conceive of, and then bring a totally different housing product back to market. Maybe they can buy better, and so they should spend their time there. And so when we thought about what we wanted to do, who we wanted to help, one, we love helping entrepreneurs. They're just a special breed, right? You're an entrepreneur, you're a CEO, you're a founder, Land Gorilla. I am too. It's hard. I mean, we know how hard it is. We lose sleep. It's very hard to sleep, right? And there's a lot that we have to do day in and day out, and it can be lonely. And so being able to be there and be a partner to these entrepreneurs was foundational to what we wanted to do with Backflip. And then it was what could we actually support them with? How could we actually help these entrepreneurs in this multifaceted part of their business? All those steps that we just described, all the categories There are certain providers of services, vendors in those categories, but are they partners? And when we thought about what we could do with Backflip, we decided, hey, we understand software, we understand data, we understand capital and lending and financing these projects very, very well. And those categories tend to not necessarily be the areas where these entrepreneurs create their own alpha. So if we can support them in these areas that otherwise are relatively time consuming, generally fairly mundane, and then allow them to go do what they do best, partner with them in these areas of their business that are necessary, but not necessarily alpha generating, then we could come up with a really cool and helpful platform. And that was the origins for Backflip. And that's obviously evolved pretty substantially in a few years, in a short amount of time. But it all starts with, who do we want to help? In this case, real estate SMB entrepreneurs, folks who are doing value add residential improvements to properties. How could we possibly help them, and where do we have a right to win? And then you ideate from there. And so Backflip's built our business around 3 pillars: software, technology as a pillar, capital as a pillar, and community as a pillar. But it all was spurred from this catalyst around how can we help these entrepreneurs revitalize homes.
Really, when you hear all that, Backflip's definitely more than just a lender, right? You're really differentiating yourself in more than one area. How much does that help? If I put myself in the shoes of a borrower out there that's, doing 5 to 10 flips a year, how much does that help me?
It's a great question. I think it comes back to, do people generally like to be more efficient? Mm-hmm. Just foundationally, as humans, do we like to better utilize our time? And if the answer is yes, and I believe it is, and most of our members and our customers, I think, feel the same way, then what are the ways with which we can help you save time or better utilize your time? Mm-hmm. And maybe that has to do with what we do specifically around our lending operations, lending products, of which we think very thoughtful, very intentional, and we try to make things both easy and drive a lot of customer support and customer service into our products. And it's fun, and we'll talk about some of the lending innovations that we've created already with Backflip. But we don't just want to stop there. We really believe that partnering with these individuals, with our members, to support them in whatever parts of their journey they're struggling in or otherwise spending a lot of time in, is the right approach. And that value added kind of give first mindset, partner mindset, starting with things like giving them an app, which we've built and deliver to our customers to help them think through which properties they may want to buy, analyze their leads. It's a pipeline curation tool. It's data driven. It gives them information at their fingertips in real time to determine what type of property I might want to buy, what's the highest and best use of this property, where are their risks, and how can I de-risk my project? And as they're underwriting these properties and evaluating deals, we're also, what's great is that it's all kind of a compounding flywheel. We're evaluating the properties as well. We're looking at the data in real time via our application. It's informing our algorithms, and it's going to make it that much easier for us to say yes very quickly with a personalized lending product for that same customer, who now all of a sudden has a trusted experience with Backflip. We've been building brand trust and loyalty from very early kind of customer experiences, well before they were ready to borrow from Backflip as a lending customer. And it's all kind of this compounding flywheel. The more data that our customers both get from us and give to us in terms of what they're analyzing, the better the algorithm is at helping them predict what that property could be worth or what they might want to do to that project. And the more projects that we fund successfully with our members and that they successfully complete, the better our capital providing access becomes. And we continue to drive better and more access to better capital terms, better capital products, cheaper capital for our customers. And we can innovate again and again and again using this compounding flywheel, where software supports lending and capital and lending supports software. And so it's kind of just foundational and built into our DNA.
I really like what you said in there about, serving up information and available properties in a particular area to your members. that to me right off the bat, without having to go to a bunch of interviews, customer interviews, sounds like, yeah, that's a huge home run. I've got somebody looking out for me, helping me find and identify properties that are going to fit my particular profile in my particular area. And then you guys are almost pre-underwriting the collateral in those situations to serve up to them. Is that kind of like you're doing work that can help expedite the process to them, and then serving that information to them for faster decisions, more profitable decisions? Is that kind of the way to think
That's
about it?
exactly right. Mm-hmm.
And how many of your members, I don't know if you can share this, so stop me at any time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a pretty popular part of the value add from Backflip? Is that, hey, I've got somebody looking for me, and I'm, half of the properties that flow through Backflip are served up by Backflip? Or would you say, is that part of the secret sauce? And, how many are being selected and presented that you present versus they go out and find on their own?
Our app product is mission critical to a number of our members. And quite frankly, it's actually used by people who don't borrow from us as well, which probably isn't the best business practice. But at the end of the day, we believe that driving value in any way, shape, and form, even if it's not necessarily transacted upon, is the right approach. At this point, we are seeing literally about $5 billion a month in analyzed properties on Backflip.
Wow.
And that's been exponentially growing through a really tough and challenging market. But it shows, I think, the power of what we've been able to offer, and how folks, either for one reason or another, are having a hard time doing it with their status quo offering. They may be able to have access to the MLS if they have, a license in their local real estate as a local real estate agent, or maybe they work with a local agent. But as everyone knows, the MLS is not easy to utilize. It's not, customer centric or good UI. And so we've allowed them to take what otherwise would be hard to gather. They could use Zillow or Realtor, some of these consumer platforms, consumer tools, and we've repurposed a lot of that information, a lot of that data, and augmented and supported a bunch of our data, first-party data, that is purpose-built and designed to give them the data, the information, the insights that they would want or need as a real estate investor, not just a consumer who maybe is interested in, looking at the pictures that are available to someone on a Zillow listing. And so I think it's just that there's a unique niche in the market when you think about this customer and what they need to do really daily, as they're running their business, and a lack of providers. And it's really just an underserved software opportunity that we believe, we have the right team, support, business ideas, and DNA to kind of help build, and it supplements and complements everything that we're doing with the capital and the lending supply.
No, that's really, really interesting. And you touched on the customer, right there. Is there a particular type of customer that just thrives on your platform, that you have in the back of your mind that, hey, this group over here really, really does well, and why do they do well?
We have tens of thousands of individuals who are on our platform. It's pretty robust at this point, and we end up having a total mix of different, what we call personas, that are on our platform. I think what you're asking, which is a good way to think about it, is what would we perceive as our ideal customer persona, which I'll talk about. And then we also have other personas, which I think are worth touching on just for perspective. Our ideal, and we have fun with all of this, and our ideal customer, and this is part of our just business kind of operating culture and our value system. We call our ideal customer personas Eddie Entrepreneur. These are entrepreneurs who are, out there doing amazing work. They're the heroes of the story. Like, they are doing amazing projects, and we love supporting them. And we also have one that we love, which is called Theo Thoroughbred. And Eddie and Theo are our two kind of ideal customer personas. Those customers are operating kind of across the US. At this point, we're operating in all 50 states from a data and app standpoint, and we can lend in 42 states. And they have all sorts of different, very interesting business plans. Individuals may want to operate, a small Airbnb portfolio, and we can help them think about what properties they might want to buy and then do the value add to create that custom portfolio for themselves. They may have a strategy that is completely based on reselling assets, within a 4 to 6 month period. So fix it up, create the value, put it back on the market, often at a very attractive, very affordable price point. The average sale price for our customers is still well below kind of the market means or market medians in these markets. It's below 400,000 kind of across the board. So it's a great way to kind of continue to add high quality, desirable housing stock to an entry-level first-time homeowner, which is a part of the market that has just been completely underserved. I mean, the whole market obviously is lacking supply, but this particular price point and subsector is particularly underserved. And so I love being able to help our customers bring those types of housing product back to the market in a way that's modern and refreshed for our customer. And then it's worth noting, going back to the persona question and who we help, it's worth noting we have some larger players, regional funds, and larger funds that like things that we're doing with Backflip. They're not our ideal customer persona today. We don't really work with them on a regular basis. We don't have an enterprise team or focus within our business. And we have a lot of what we would call aspiring entrepreneurs. I mean, there is a reason HGTV is like as wildly popular as it is, right? There's this kind of native interest in what we're all doing as it relates to improving housing stock. And there's like a real foundational need, kind of macro level need with housing. And there's what we call them analyzer Annies, is one of our personas. And this is a group that often maybe hasn't quite gotten started in their real estate entrepreneur journey, but we have a lot of educational programming, a lot of community, and a lot of that software data and tooling to help them think through what they actually might want to do to take that first step. And unlike the gurus, which you can go learn from a guru how to get started, we don't charge anyone for any of this. And we don't just do a weekend seminar and then say, good luck, good luck, go do your first property and scale in your business. We think of it very differently. We say, hey, a lot of that education and mentorship and even the software and data should be free. And you can use our app for free today on Backflip. And if and when you're ready, we'll be here to support you in other parts of scaling your business. And so it's just a very foundationally different approach to what is a very interesting and, quite frankly, like growing and needed industry.
I love this. And, if anybody has not picked up, Josh, you're definitely like a product-led founder there at Backflip, and all the software terminology and sales with ICP and, user personas, and, just amazing to have this conversation. And as we kind of transition, I mean, you started to transition yourself, from like that first foundational pillar of software, more into the capital side and what you do. And with that product background, it seems like through this customer experience and all the data that you're collecting and all the help that you're offering from the software side, how does all of that affect this capital pillar? And what does that capital pillar really mean?
When we first started the business, even though we use the name Backflip, which has a lot of different connotations, including we back your flip, as part of the fun of using that name, we actually didn't know that we were certainly going to be a capital providing company. And what we'd learned in a lot of early discovery and working with what is now our customer and trying to understand truly and deeply and intimately what are their needs and what are their true pain points. What became blatantly obvious is, one, there's a lot of needs, right? Kind of across everything that they do, and a lot of areas where they could use help and support and a partner. And one of the bigger unlocks for a lot of folks is either that initial access to the right type of capital or access to capital to scale. But more importantly, it's not that the access itself is foundationally that difficult. It's kind of difficult. What's really hard to do is, how do I have transparent access? How do I have access with trust? How do I have access with someone who honestly wants me to be successful, who actually sees me as a partner? When you think about most lenders, and this is not just true in our space, but this is kind of built into the DNA of a lot of capital providers, they think about a double-sided marketplace. They have someone that they're giving money to and someone that they're getting money from, at the most simplistic sense. And often a capital provider, a lender or otherwise, their client, their customer, often starts with who do they get the money from? Right? It's whether it's their upstream capital providers, institutional capital providers, retail consumers, if they have deposits, if they're a bank, various people that they get money from as a primary customer. Who do they give money to is an afterthought. They get the money from someone, and then all of a sudden they figure out, how can I give this money to someone who's going to generate a yield that's going to allow me to take my cut and satisfy the needs of my capital providers. And we thought about it very different. We just, from a first principle, said our customer is this entrepreneur, is this person who wants and needs the money. What are their pain points? What do they really need within the capital product specifically? How can we listen to them and hopefully build and create capital products that are dynamic and thoughtful and personalized for them as the true customer? And at the same time, make sure that we can find capital that understands, that we can articulate this vision, that we can connect the dots between the people who need the capital and the people who have the capital. And we can successfully explain to the capital providers that the way that they see their business might be the right way for us to lend and for us to create capital products. So we actually started kind of at that level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And I also see that there's this overlap. I'll make an assumption here that there's this huge, amazing overlap opportunity from, what you're doing on the software side, and this great amount of information, and even the performance, your member performance, to be able to serve a lot of that up to the capital partners in a way that's just never been done before, right? And I think about that, what you're doing on the front end, and being able to help with the software for your members in analyzing the properties, and hey, these are but how much of that is actually carrying through to the capital partner in understanding, like, hey, our members are different.
It's essential.
Yeah.
It's essential. It's foundational. We are a relatively new business. We started this company in 2021 is kind of when we launched in a private beta. We have a few years now of track record, growing track record, and very successful track record, and high quality performance from a lending track record standpoint. And it started and starts with and is built around the fact that we have this set of philosophies, and that we have this software product offering and platform, and that we have this robust data set that goes well beyond a single line item that is, this is a deal, or even this is a borrower. Most lenders don't even look at it as this is a borrower, as a person, as a human. They look at it as this is a loan, this is a deal, this is the asset. That's the unique data that they look at. We have this incredibly robust, incredibly rich set of history about individuals, about humans, and how they think about potentially deploying their time and their money and scaling their business. And it's unique. And we can take that, and it helps us think through, who do we want to work with and why? And what can we actually offer them from a product standpoint, from a capital product standpoint? Hopefully that's that sets them up for success, sets them up for more success in this particular project, or generally as they operate their business. And so our lending products today, just to get a little bit more specific, our lending products today are pretty much exclusively within what's called the fix and flip category. In the institutional capital markets, it's called the RTL category, residential transition loans is kind of our category. And it's a 12-month term entry-level loan to let people get into a property, use lending proceeds to purchase the property, and also use lending proceeds to rehab and do the construction component of the value add flip that they're trying to operate. But get in and get out. So 12 months, and then maybe they're selling again. That could be our proceeds to repay the loan. Or maybe they want to refi into a longer term DSCR loan. Maybe it's a FHA loan or whatever they choose if they want to hold the asset for a little bit longer. And within that category, there's very little innovation generally as a sector, as an industry. A lot of there's some major, very well-run businesses that are national providers, and there are a lot of kind of regional providers of this capital product, fix and flip loan product, and they tend to all kind of win around things like, what are my origination points? What's my interest rate? Maybe how much liquidity can I give you? Like, what's the LTC or LTV ARV on the loan? Maybe some other parts of the loan terms, like terms specifically, or prepayment penalty, or a few of these elements. And within just that one category, Backflip has already introduced several specific capital products, and we have fun names for them. So we have our gold standard. That's our kind of our general purpose loan. That's our most popular loan. It was our first loan that's tried and true. It works great. People love that loan. We also have what we call a double-double, which is a fun, different way for individuals who have a certain type of business plan. They have a specific eligibility to get access to that loan. They're like operating a specific type of business. We have the track record to prove that, and they have the track record to prove that. And so we give them access to a specific bespoke loan. And we've introduced a really, really cool and interesting loan called the Zero Gravity, the loan that sets you free. And that loan was actually kind of ideated through what is traditionally used in commercial real estate, in larger scale projects. And it's got some really interesting components, including capitalized fees and interest. So the individual customer, the borrower, isn't out of pocket on any of those fees until they actually have profit or proceeds from the sale. So at the end, it's more of a balloon payment method on that loan product. And it's taking what we understand as the customer's pain points, right? Really trying to deeply understand our member, our borrower, who they are, what business plan they're trying to operate, and working from there as the starting point into what types of solutions could possibly be available, or could we create to serve those needs. And then figuring out, like, structurally, can we do those in a way that has multiple capital providers that love and are excited to partner with us to provide this capital, right? We need, at this point, hundreds of millions of dollars of access of capital, which we're able to provide back to our members, and do it across a resilient set of partners who are trusted, and we trust them, and we work really closely together. That allows us to have resiliency, because at the end of the day, more than anything else, our customer needs to trust that we're going to be there. Our borrower needs to know that they've started to work with Backflip, they've done some deals with us. Are we going to be there for the next deal? Are we going to be able to move fast on the next deal? Are we going to be able to close on the day that they expect? And is it going to be the high quality that they've come to now expect with Backflip? And that's something that we've kind of built into our operating DNA, into our core values, into our culture.
You guys have such a unique approach, and I've never, it's rare that we hear somebody, talk in the way that you do, Josh, about, your members and your customers and your approach with these three pillars. When I think of, what you guys are doing, and it all starts to kind of manifest in my head, and you guys got all this great data, and we haven't even got into the risk and analysis, but and I'm sure that's like just some fun conversations that you had. But when you think about this journey and what you've gotten into, especially around the data and the risk, what are some of the things that have surprised you? Because you have an amazing perspective of understanding, what your customer's doing, what they're trying to do. The data that you're serving up to them is immensely, right front and center, day in and day out. What have been some of the interesting discoveries in this process? And I'll kind of elaborate. The way things have always been done. We hear that a lot. Hey, it's worked in the past. Doing what you're doing and having access to that information I assume has really brought some things to light that you never even thought existed, or you never even thought happened, or to look at it in a different way. What are some of the interesting discoveries that you've made, kind of in this journey with Backflip about, wow, that's we never knew that, but now that we're doing it this way, that kind of changes the way that we think about things. Like, what are some of those things?
The first principles around serving a customer and trying to be customer first, and that mindset is not something that is always necessarily done in our space and in our industry. And yet that is something actually that we knew because of how successful other businesses that have applied that methodology in other sectors. We knew that that would be a winning strategy out of the gate, and it was. We started, as I mentioned, with a private beta, very, very, very little marketing. We've rarely spent money to acquire customers even today. Most of our customer distribution still comes through referrals and word of mouth and people who are just really, truly enjoying their experience with Backflip and want to share that with their friends and business partners and colleagues. And so that all hasn't surprised us. It's been kind of proving what we had hoped would be the case. What was interesting, and we didn't know this when we started the business, was how things would evolve from a fiscal macro standpoint over our very short operating history. In our sector, I mean, you see this all the time, how the higher cost of capital, how interest rates, have potentially changed the operational dynamic for folks. And, back in summer 2022, and even I guess in Q2 of 2022, when it was quite obvious that the Fed was very closely looking at inflation and was going to make moves on interest rates, I don't think anyone knew at that point that it was going to be the steepest, quickest velocity of accelerated interest rates that we've ever seen. I think that was pretty surprising to folks. And it definitely has halted and created some headwinds in the industry by and large, right? Transaction volume across residential has dropped like a lead balloon. And it's harmed a lot of providers. What I and our team was pleasantly surprised by, because we had to increase our interest rates, of course. The base rate goes up, the spreads are what they are. We've actually decreased our margin, and the spread that we take has gone down a bit, but we've obviously moved our costs of capital up and pricing up. Was that our members, the customer, did not change. The demand did not change. Their ability to operate, even in what became a much higher cost of capital environment, didn't dramatically shift. It didn't shift nearly as much as we'd expected it to shift. And this was something that, in hindsight, I can appreciate fully, but in the moment, I didn't fully appreciate. And that is how these value-add investments are done, how these individual customers buy, improve, and then think about monetizing these assets. It, quite frankly, just has so much equity. It, quite frankly, just has so much upside. It allows for our customer to think about their business and their P&L slightly differently. They think about the different expense line items, lending, cost of capital being one, as just something that they have to manage within an overall P&L. And yes, our costs have gone up, but it was one of many line items. And before that, it was that lumber was much more expensive, right? And that cost materials were a lot higher. And things move, right, within their P&L and their expense line items. But given the amount of equity that they have, profit potential that they have, upside that they have, especially as it relates to some of the Backflip members who are doing these deals and already like naturally inclined to have alpha and more alpha, and then they like to use data, they like to use tooling. It happens to be a group of people, that are inclined to be good operators. And so these individuals found really interesting ways to continue to operate their business pretty successfully throughout the environment. And so we were worried that, back half of 2022 and 2023 would continue to be, difficult market operational environments for folks. And it actually just hasn't truly proven to be the case. Our customers continue to run very successful businesses, continue to operate at fairly consistent velocities, and we continue to grow. The business of Backflip has continued to be quite successful, kind of despite what we thought may be the case, which is that pricing may be a hindrance to scale. And that was just a surprise to us, that pricing actually, by and large, is one factor, but it's maybe like a top 5 consideration. It's not number 1, it's not number 2. And if pricing changes dramatically, which it has, that all of a sudden these individual entrepreneurs can still be resilient, and that these individuals can still make money.
It sounds like there was still a lot of opportunity out there for them as they had evolved and adjusted their business model. What do you see, like, forward thinking, in 6-12 months out? What are you starting to see or project as the opportunities?
I think the Fed isn't going to dramatically lower interest rates, quite frankly. It's kind of depending on who you ask and when you ask that question, it's either that's the status quo opinion or it's the contrarian opinion. I think, even as of yesterday, when Jerome Powell did not decide to lower rates, and I think it's become more consensus that rates are going to kind of stay at this slightly elevated level. But this is the norm. I mean, if you go back historically, it wasn't like 0% interest rates were normative. And I do believe that so long as folks have some understanding of what conditions they're operating in, some consistency, there's less volatility generally, they can be successful if they're doing something that creates value. And that's true in residential real estate for sure. If they're doing value-add investments and they can figure out ways to create value, they'll be successful. And I think foundationally, the U.S. housing market, and this is true globally, but the U.S. housing market where we operate, where you guys, where Land Gorilla, our partner supports us and operates, the housing market's old. It just is. We built most of the U.S. housing stock, starting after World War II, right? When we came back and think about the white picket fence and the rise of suburbia in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And this is what we now have in the US. And most of the desirable real estate is relatively old. And if you look at the actual numbers, it's like 68 million homes were built in the 1980s or before. The average typical lifespan for a property, you need to renovate every 20 to 40 years, depending on who you ask. And we have a number, tens of millions of homes that have reached that inflection point. And the question is, who's going to take those homes and modernize them? Right? Is it going to be our current existing owners of those assets? Maybe, possibly, but are they motivated? Do they have the financial wherewithal to do that? Is it going to be the new homeowners? Maybe. Again, I'd ask the question, are they motivated to do that? Is it built into their DNA? Or is there this middle layer, right? Is there this boots on the ground army, the Backflip member, the real estate entrepreneur, this incredible rising class of spirited entrepreneur who actually, quite frankly, is an essential part of rejuvenating housing. And so, yes, the interest rate environment's a little higher. Yes, market conditions are always going to be difficult, and there's always going to be some headwinds in the way. But I just believe fundamentally that there are too many tailwinds, way too many tailwinds for operations to not continue to scale and grow.
What do you think the magic number is when we think about interest rates where your customers are really going to thrive, your members are going to go full steam ahead and everything catches fire? What's that magic interest rate?
Obviously, cheaper is better. There's no, that's not a surprise to anyone. I actually don't think it's necessarily that the interest rates themselves need to be at a specific number, right? They could be at 4%, they could be at 6%, they could be at 8%, they could be at 20%, quite frankly, and it still works. The math still works. I think the most important thing is just access to liquidity. There has to be flow of funds. And what's really, really, really great about what's happened in our industry and happening in real time in our industry is that this industry is institutionalizing kind of within the span of just the last decade, in a way that's actually quite good. I mean, we worry about the institutionalization of SFR equity and what that means, for consumers who want to buy assets, and that's a different problem altogether. When we talk about giving access for debt capital to individual entrepreneurs and operators, generally the rule of thumb is the more different buckets of capital that are interested in doing that, the better. And it used to be historically that successful former flippers would be the ones who would give the money to new flippers who are going to be operating. That was kind of it, right? It wasn't institutionalized at all. And starting around 2012, 2013, it started to get more and more institutionalized. There started to be some private capital providers who understood what was happening at the ground level and understood kind of the return and risk profile of this asset class. And that's continued to evolve. And at this point now you have both securitizations, a robust market for securitizations in this asset class, and even beyond that, more recently, now rated securitizations. This is a relatively recent phenomenon. Morningstar has started rating RTL securitizations and investment grade ratings. Torac just did an issuance, and it opens up a different pool of loan buyers, of bond buyers, even bigger, deeper pocketed, longer term capital all of a sudden. And this kind of proliferation of what's just becoming a more and more known amongst the capital provider universe, a more and more known asset class that has great yield and relatively like appropriate risk, is just great for the customer. It's great for the individual, great for the member, especially if you have a platform like Backflip. We hope, I mean, this is what we're doing day in and day out, that can truly bridge the gap, right? That can cut out all those middlemen and can be like, we are direct to our customer, we understand their wants and needs, and we have access to, you know, the best and cheapest cost of capital and capital providers. And we can find ways to facilitate what can and should be a relatively smooth transaction. Someone needs to shine a light on this industry and on these individuals, on these members who are doing really, really helpful and important work. And if Backflip as a partner, a helper, can be one of the, you know, humbly be one of the folks who can help shine that light, we'd love to take on that challenge.
I know you really brought up some interesting things in there. One of them is, you know, the kind of like this evolution over the last decade, you know, borrowing from Bob down the street, Bob, the hard money lender, you know, that'll break your legs if you don't repay back the loan, all the way to, you know, now money's coming from Wall Street, money's coming from, you know, really large financial institutions. And, you know, that maturity over the last decade has definitely come with, you know, criticism by different housing groups or politicians, you know, as it impacts our supply of housing. And I think what, you know, having the perspective that I have from the financial crisis and, you know, what led us out of that financial crisis, you know, there were no financial institutions making construction loans after that happened. You know, there were no homes being able to get updated. You know, that movement just failed to happen, you know, partly due to all the regulatory changes that spun after that 06, 07 meltdown. But, you know, one of the things that I had a unique perspective in seeing is kind of like that birth of that maturity, but what value and importance private capital made, kind of leading us out of that downturn and being able to bring properties up to standards and putting that home back into the housing stock. So it could be purchased versus complete, you know, something completely run down that you couldn't get, you know, a consumer couldn't get, you know, regular financing for. And, you know, I would play the devil's advocate day in and day out of what role private capital plays in our markets. And I think it plays, you know, I guess there's a kind of a dark side to it, but overall, you know, it brings so much value, so much liquidity to a aged housing stock, and in some instances helps create brand new housing stock, you know, for those that are offering new construction products. You know, how much of this, you know, agree or disagree, what do you think about the criticism, you know, that's out there over private capital and housing supply and how it affects people's neighborhoods? You know, what's your opinion on all that?
I tend to agree with you, Sean. I think it is a very nuanced and highly sensitive and correctly so subject matter. Housing is so foundational to the human condition. There's a reason it's on Milo's hierarchy of needs at the foundational level. It's a very sensitive, highly politicized subject, and that's the way it should be. I mean, housing is very important. And I think the nuance starts to come in with everything. It's hard if you're trying to tell a story, if you're trying to if you're, let's say, a journalist and you're trying to write an article, it's hard to tell a nuanced story that can keep someone's attention in 500 words. It just can't really be done, quite frankly. And so it's very easy to broad brush Wall Street as the enemy, right? General capital markets as the folks who generally are making it more difficult for an individual to own or live in an affordable home. And in some instances, maybe that's slightly true, right? I do believe that like certain parts of the SFR equity markets, where these institutional REIT homeowners and buyers possibly maybe making it either maybe taking inventory off the market, or maybe making it slightly less affordable for the individual to own assets. I think there's some truth to that part of the story. Having said that, what we do at Backflip, and what a lot of folks do, and I think this is not just unique to Backflip, but we work with all sorts of capital, not just Wall Street, but we work with Wall Street. We work with other capital providers. And when Wall Street works through Backflip and with Backflip, the money flows into the hands of individuals. It's designed to actually not like let Wall Street own a bunch of homes. It's designed to actually facilitate individuals, more individuals, to go out and do more of that work that is essential. And what you were describing around the lack of liquidity in 2010 through 2014, quite frankly, that's come back to really hurt us, because we underbuilt and we underimproved for a decade plus. I mean, unfortunately, it's just known now in hindsight that we needed to be building and we needed to be improving more homes. And now that's come back to hurt us, because quite frankly, the delta between supply and demand today that we're facing is a much larger contributor to the fact that homes are not affordable than the fact that a few of the homes, quite frankly, like not that much from a percentage standpoint, are actually owned by Wall Street, right? The 2% of homes that are owned by Wall Street actually doesn't change the pricing dynamic nearly as much as the fact that we truly underbuilt by millions of homes over a decade plus. And so had we had that liquidity and continued liquidity and more liquidity, I think it would have, quite frankly, allowed us to be in a better place for everyone as it relates to housing. You just have to let the free markets operate. And in this case, there's a major supply-demand imbalance. And when that exists, figure out how to support supply. It's somewhat simple.
Thoroughly agree, and, I like what you said about, somebody trying to write an article. It's almost done in the sense for clicks, the clickbait, and it's easy to villainize somebody that's making money, in a transaction. And I definitely want to distinguish, what we're talking about, so nobody gets confused. These are short-term loans, and not loans that are, meant to acquire and be held by a private company to rent out and suck up, housing stock, like we've read in some articles. And, I definitely want to make sure we get to this other question about community, but, to kind of tie this up, it's really, really important, that people understand the value that this capital and these business models, and especially what you're doing with Backflip, brings to the markets, and being able to help, prevent, the housing stock from getting older, provide new housing, and how it betters, communities at the end of the day. And you look around in your own neighborhoods and you see homes get renovated and improved, and what that does to housing values, and what that does to the local economy, and buying the drywall and marketing it and property tax, like it all, helps at the end of the day, especially the community, which kind of leads us to the last pillar there. And I'm really curious, and I think our listeners are as well. We've talked about software, we've talked about capital, super exciting, tell me about the community.
Well, and I'm excited to share a lot about community. I also would love to just say that I agree. And, the work that Land Gorilla and just generally, like, we need to figure out more efficient and more effective ways to allow for things to be built and rebuilt. it's kind of simple. And so we all need to help each other. And this speaks to community. We all need to belong somewhere. I think that's also part of the human conditions. We tend to think about it first and foremost around values. Are there shared values? Are there shared beliefs that people consistently would like to repeatedly action? We have a set of values at Backflip that we're very proud of, one of which is raise the standards of what's possible. And our members gravitate to that. They're the types of individuals who want to raise their own standards. And when you support a community that believes that, generally, it attracts others who believe that. And we do things different. We're pretty unconventional, as you probably can tell. And we find ways to support and give back to the community and foster that same sense of community. We have a really cool event that we host called closing dinners. And what is a closing dinner? We talked at the beginning of this episode about all the work that has to be done by our members, right, to be successful in this business, let alone in a specific project. It's a lot of work and it's fairly lonely. And after all that work's done, they often don't even take the time to celebrate. There's not a moment or a group or other people that they can, click a glass with and be like, job well done. Let's pat ourselves on the back. And I've operated in other sectors and other businesses, and I've sold big companies and all these things as myself in my career. And when I was working in New York and doing this, you sell a business for $100 million or $1 billion, someone takes everyone out to dinner. There's a nice closing dinner that the bankers or the lawyers or someone's paying for, where everyone gets to celebrate. And in our industry, in single family, it doesn't exist. And we thought, why not? And could Backflip help figure out a fun, interesting way to do that? And so we've started, again, this goes in the theme of community. We do a bunch of different things like this, but we started hosting closing dinners. Anyone who's closed on a loan in the last month, not loan, excuse me, on a successful project, home in the last month, is invited. And it's a highly qualified, highly bespoke, high quality group. And it's intimate, and folks, there's no business. I mean, of course, everyone wants to talk business, but it's not Backflip thing. We pay for it, but that's it. And for a night, for an evening, folks get to celebrate all their efforts, all their hard work, the profit that they've earned rightfully. And the fact that they just put a new home back on the market and a new family can live in that home. It's a lot to celebrate. The next morning, they have to get back to work. We all have to get back to work. But for a moment, for a night, let's celebrate. And that's, how we think about community. That's an example of one of the things that we do at Backflip. It's finding ways to bring an elevated sense of experience to everything that we do. Because at the end of the day, it has to be fun. And so it's important to us. We built it into our operating DNA, and it seems to be beloved by members. So we're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, no, that's really important. You mentioned something earlier about kind of like that entrepreneur persona, and it is lonely. It's not like you get to run in a pack of people that share these interests and do these things every single day. And I can contest to that. And we help foster community in a slightly different way. We do some lender roundtables and allow them to have, we create these really safe environments for different lending groups just to simply get together and exchange notes and talk about issues. And I can't tell you how well received those experiences are, and probably a lot along the lines of the way of these closing dinners work, where you feel the recognition, you're able to talk to somebody else that's gone through the exact same thing that you have and celebrate with them. And it's such an amazing experience to be on the receiving end of that. And I think that your members, customers, clients, the people that we interact with in this are definitely value that. Is there anything else on the horizon that that Backflip is working on today, or like, hey, this is where we see ourselves in the next few years, and we're adding this great thing to the platform or community?
We are always adding cool, great things to the platform and
Like what? Give us an example.
community. I think we're exploring, like others, probably we're exploring best utilizations for things like artificial intelligence, AI, and not in the buzzwordy sense. If there are, again, going back to first principles, if there are needs that our customers have, that our members have, that we believe a form of a solution could incorporate things like AI as part of a solution set, we will consider such things. And we're building out some things using the same. We're getting closer to launching some pilots around that. And it's a never ending opportunity and challenge in business, and specifically in our sector and in our business. I think this is probably true, and you probably believe the same thing, Sean. I know you've been working Land Gorilla, like started this business quite some time ago. I think we have many decades, maybe never ending opportunities ahead of us. There are foundational elements of the fact that like we are working in the built world, and the built world, has real challenges and has consistent needs and is always evolving. And so finding better, newer, interesting ways to help and to create new products that can serve whomever we're trying to serve at that point in time, in this case, our members, but it's just kind of built into our DNA. We'll never stop.
I thoroughly agree. Lots of opportunity out there. And, in the words of Doug Duncan, the chief economist at Fannie Mae, these just stick with me, is that, the housing issues and the housing situation that we see there, it's a multi-generational problem, and hopefully the work that you're doing at Backflip and what we're doing at Land Gorilla, can make an impact on that, so that, our children are not faced with this same cost of housing and availability, that we can make some sort of impact on our industry.
Exactly.
And as we conclude this podcast and we get to the end here, we do this rapid fire session, Josh, that you know about. And I'm just going to start firing off some questions at you if you're ready.
Bring it on.
Okay. Any book or movie that you have recently seen that you would recommend to somebody else?
I tend to love sci-fi, and I reread a great sci-fi that I would definitely recommend book. It's a series called The Three Body Problem.
The Three Problem.
Three Body Problem. Yeah. Okay. In fact, I think they're going to turn. I just saw something. I think the folks who did Game of Thrones might be turning this into some form of a series or movie. I'm not sure. But it's a fantastic trilogy. Highly recommend.
And what's it about? Just give me the summary.
If you want to break your brain, read The Three Body Problem. I mean, it is pretty wild. And just to give some context, I like sci-fi, not just because it's interesting and different and the math and the science behind it all, but honestly because it takes often humans, it takes us and puts us in a different, interesting environment, and still looks at things like how we would respond, what's our philosophy, sociology, psychology. Like, it takes the human condition and puts it in different lenses. And so for me, I find it quite interesting. I use it as inspiration for things that we do in life and business. And The Three Body Problem just takes sci-fi to a whole new level. And takes like the conceptions around what it means to what we're here for and what it means to be human and what we're dealing with, and just incredible ideas and very well written.
I absolutely love it. I got to go download it and read it or listen to it. That's really cool. Really cool. All right. Second question, and I love that you're a product guy and speak to this. When you're hiring somebody or bringing them into Backflip, what's one of your favorite go-to interview questions?
I like to hire for upside and potential. I mean, I like to understand like values and understand, ability to do the job today, but I also really am excited about what we're building. And I think people kind of create everything that we're doing. I mean, we can't have a business without people. And so I like to ask about that. I ask someone to put themselves in the mind of their boss, their former boss, or someone else. I say, if I were to ask your boss, what would they tell me you are exceptional at?
That's a good one. And what kind of responses do people give you to that?
Most people have a little bit of a hard time because they don't know how to, one, like take their own mind and put it into someone else's mind. And then so that's a good way to kind of jar them at first. You have to like get them out of their comfort zone a bit when you ask these types of questions. And then they often give you the truth. Like, what do they think that they're really good at? Which is great. Like, I would love to hear from themselves. Hopefully they're self-aware. What do they believe they're exceptional at or could be exceptional at? And then if you get to do reference checks, you kind of
build
how
that
consistent. How consistent is it?
Yeah. No, that's crazy. All right, last question here, and it's kind of a two-part question. And the first part is: have you ever built your own home?
No.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Since you answered no, would you ever build your own home?
I think so. Yes. I've flipped homes and I'm around flipping and I'm around new builds as well quite frequently. I haven't done that yet, and I think I would. I have a feeling if and when I do it, it will be if I'm fortunate enough to be able to, have a second home, it would be my first non-primary home.
First non-primary home. That's a great one. It's amazing that question. I think only one person has said that they would not do it. And it's such an interesting question because, our audience, myself, we see the ins and outs of what people go through when, flipping a home or doing a renovation or building a new home, and the stress and all the things that come with that experience. And, I would love to build my own home, and I think that, we have a certain advantage of knowing what those pitfalls are and what makes success and what makes failure and all of that. But Josh, this has just been an absolute pleasure having you on, and so many exciting things happening at Backflip, and just how different you are from other companies that are out there. So thank you for attending the podcast. And if people wanted to learn more about Backflip or reach out and contact you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been fun. Getting a chance to share some stories. Anyone can reach Backflip. Our business is just dobackflip.com. You can also download, we have mobile apps both in the iOS App Store and the Google Play Store, if you're interested in playing with and downloading and using our products. And I personally can be reached via email. I'm pretty straightforward, josh@dobackflip.com.
Fantastic. We'll go ahead and get your contact information when we post the webinar here, and you should be able to find it in the bottom section here. But thank you for being on, Josh. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to hearing more about Backflip in the future.
Likewise, it's been great, and thanks for your work and partnership on everything that we're doing commercially, and excited to be continuing it. So thank you again.
This podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only and does not replace independent professional judgment. Land Gorilla Inc. makes no representations, warranties, or promises for and disclaims any express or implied warranties related to content. Before acting on any information, you should consider the appropriateness of the information as it pertains to your unique business needs.